Hey everyone, my name's Jake. I just graduated in the spring from TCU. I was a political science major and a criminal justice minor, and I'm currently a 1L at Pepperdine Law.
I'm Ralph Carter. I'm a university pre-law advisor here at TCU. I'm in the political science department, but we work with all TCU students who want to go to law school.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. I'm just going to go ahead and ask you guys the questions if that's cool with everyone. Perfect. Okay, so just to start, what resources did you find most helpful while studying for the LSAT?
Yeah, so I actually took one of the classes that TCU advertises, and I think it was about a 5-week course. We met 2 times a week for about 3 hours, give or take a night. And that was probably like my introduction into studying. But after that, I really think a lot of it's repetition, just taking those practice tests, taking a ton of practice problems, because the more you see and the more you do, the more you kind of get a feel for them, if that makes sense.
I also took a prep course at TCU, and I realized during that course the areas I needed to focus on. And I would highly recommend a website called 7Sage. They have a bunch of free explanations for LSAT problems on there. So like Jake said, I would take practice tests, see which ones I got wrong, and then you can go watch like a video tutorial explaining the correct answer and also explaining why each of the other answer options is wrong. And I found that super helpful. I would also say a mistake I made was only working on the sections that I found most enjoyable. So I spent a lot of time doing reading comprehension and patting myself on the back for studying so hard. But then logic games I ignored when really I should have done the opposite.
What was that website one more time? I'm going to go ahead and write that down.
It's called 7Sage, like the number 7, SAGE.
Perfect. Thank you. Perfect. And then the next question is going to be, how have you managed your time with studying and balancing social life during law school?
Yeah, so first I'd recommend kind of setting a schedule. Just have like a routine every day, wake up around the same time, make yourself breakfast, just find a way to get into something consistent, because it can be easy to kind of slack off for an hour or two and let the day go by. And it's a lot harder because I imagine it's the same for Alex, but we've been entirely remote. So, most of the day I'm just sitting up here in my desk, which can suck at times. But I would just say try to find times to try to make time to do things for yourself, whether that's working out, cooking, or just find a hobby that, gives yourself an hour or two just to clear your head, because it can be stressful, but that's kind of part of it.
Definitely second the schedule. And I think it's kind of counterintuitive, but also scheduling time to relax too, because at the same time, you'll find yourself like scrolling through Facebook or whatever longer than you thought. You might also realize you've been working on the same assignment and just spinning your wheels and not actually doing anything productive. Parkinson's law says that, your tasks will expand to the amount of time you have to do them. So I feel like without a schedule, you might find yourself taking way too long reading a certain case or way too long outlining, and it's just not that helpful. In terms of a social life, I would also say it was very weird at first going to like Zoom social events, but they actually do help. And it's really a great way to meet your classmates. Everyone is in the same situation, feeling strange and looking for friends. So hopefully things aren't still virtual when y'all get there, but if they are, try to embrace it and make the most of it.
Perfect. And then what is your best piece of advice for students wanting to go to law school?
I think first off, utilize the resources that TCU gives you. I mean, there's a ton of advantages to going to a smaller school like TCU, and I'll give you one example. So my roommate graduated from UCLA a few years back, and he was telling me just how hard it was for him to find someone to get a letter of recommendation. And I'm sitting here taking multiple professors like 3 or 4 times, like, wow, I can't relate to that at all. So, reach out to Dr. Carter. He was very helpful with me. And then I would recommend try to find some law classes during undergrad. So I picked up a criminal justice minor just because I wanted to take classes like criminal law, civil rights and liberties. And that kind of gives you, I don't want to say it helps you necessarily when you're in law school, but at least gives you a background to the kind of stuff you're going to be doing and what you're going to be studying.
I think that's such a good point about the letters of recommendation. It's really meaningful having someone that you've taken classes with for multiple semesters that can speak to like your consistent dedication and just general good personality and fit for a particular school. I would also say don't forget about that TCU network once you get to law school. You'd be surprised how many different TCU alumni there are at different law firms where you might want to work. And I've had such a great experience reaching out to someone who graduated years before I ever started at TCU, and they're so happy to help a fellow Horned Frog. And also, just as a more general piece of advice, I think everyone needs to remember to give themselves a chance. I know I wasn't going to bother applying to Berkeley because I didn't think that there was like a chance of even getting in. And I think it's really important to just sometimes reach further than you think you'll ever get, and you might surprise yourself, particularly when you have the support of TCU and everyone here.
Yeah, don't say no to yourself.
Awesome. Thank you. For those who are interested in taking a law class, the criminal law class is open for the spring semester. All right. Here we go. With so many options, how do you find a law school that is best fit for you?
So I think, and you'll hear a lot about this, but I think location is important first off, because I would recommend attending to and applying to law schools in a state where you plan on working or you can see yourself living, because as you know, you have to take the bar for each individual state, and most of those schools are going to have connections nearby. Second, for me, I really liked the small school appeal of TCU and having those connections with professors. So that's kind of what mirrored my approach when looking into law schools, and Pepperdine's a smaller law school compared to others. So that helped. That was kind of one of the bigger things for me, because I'm a very vocal learner, having discussions back and forth. So I knew that was big for me.
Yeah, I think it's important to get as many perspectives on different law schools as possible, and also get perspectives from people outside of formal like law school informational events. Yeah, everyone that's at a law school informational event is kind of a self-selected huge fan of that school if they're willing to go talk about it to prospective students. So I think it's important to reach out to people that are current students in a more informal setting, so you can get like a very realistic picture of what day-to-day life is like there. And I also think it's easy to ask other people for advice about what school you're going to, but at the same time, everyone has their own personal comfort level with like the size of the school or the amount of debt that you would have to take on, or like the potential job opportunities at particular schools. So I think it's important to remember that this is your decision, it's your career, and you need to do what you think is best, regardless of like what some ranking system or whatever else says about it.
Perfect. And then I know this was briefly mentioned already, but how have you guys navigated law school during the pandemic?
Yeah, we kind of talked about this earlier, but for one thing, getting outside is nice. It's easy to be cooped up in your apartment or house all day. And I would say, like Alex talked about, finding a group of people, even if you can't hang out in person, is super helpful, because everyone's in the same boat and everyone's struggling. It sucks that we're in this situation, but everyone's going through it. So there's a sense of community in that.
I also think in some ways, the norm of everything being online and either over Zoom or over email has actually helped me. Like, it's a lot less nerve wracking to send someone a cold email when that's the only way anyone can contact each other. Like, if there's, an alum at a particular law firm, it's a lot easier to reach out to them. And because you're not asking them to like meet you somewhere in person and take time out of their day, it's just like a quick Zoom call. I feel like people have been way more receptive, so there are some silver linings to the situation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Let's see. I'm sorry. What made you choose your specific concentration of law?
So Alex might be able to speak more to this because I'm still in my first semester, but I've always been super interested in sports. So one of the things I applied for, or not applied for, but decided when I was attending law school is I wanted to join the entertainment, media, and sports program here. So they have clubs that kind of network you with other people working in that field, and they set you up with mentors. They call it a preceptor program with someone who's usually either younger, recently graduated, that's working in that field. But the beauty of law school is you're going to take so many different classes that you're going to find out what you like and what you're interested in. So I know for a fact I'm not going into real estate because property law just goes over my head like every class. But at the same time, I really enjoy criminal law. So I think that's kind of something you get to figure out when you're here.
Yeah, I think something that is really different about law school versus undergrad is that you really can check out a bunch of different things. It's not like you have a major where you have to take certain classes in order to graduate. You get to just check out a bunch of different stuff. I know my first year, I signed up for a bunch of different clubs and journals and went to a bunch of lunch talks where people explained what day-to-day life looked like in different industries. And through that, I realized that I was interested in privacy law and cybersecurity. And then from there, it's really easy to take different classes within that concentration and figure out like your niche area. So I think it's nice to be able to cast a wide net. And I think it's important to keep an open mind when you come into law school, especially after you spend so much time crafting your personal statement and coming up with this narrative and what you think you want to do. I thought I wanted to do environmental law. I got there and I was like, wow, this is kind of boring. Like, I'm way more interested personally in this data technology stuff. So definitely don't get too caught up in your own like personal statement narrative and let yourself explore.
Data shows that most law school students have no real firm idea when they walk in the door as a 1L what kind of career they're going to have, what kind of law they're going to specialize in. And like both of you said, it's during that 3 years in law school that you begin to gravitate toward the things you find most fulfilling, the areas of law that you find most interesting, the professors that move you the most, all those sorts of things are things you discover.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question is, what organizations or activities were you involved in your undergrad, and did any of them play a role in deciding to go to law school?
So I was in a fraternity. So most of my on-campus activities in relation to philanthropy intramurals were related to that. But I served as the head of our judiciary board for 2 years. So I would handle a lot of the internal conflict when situations came up. But so yeah, in a way that I would say that did kind of push me more so in the direction of law school, thinking like, okay, I've been doing this, I have, and I don't want to say I enjoy it, but I think I'm good at it. So it kind of seemed natural to apply to law school.
Probably unsurprisingly, since I'm at Berkeley right now, I was involved with women's studies in the TCU Democrats, and being in both of those sort of organizations definitely increased my awareness of the number of areas that laws are still developing or need to be developed. And even though that ultimately isn't what I've found interesting at law school, it definitely got me thinking more about the processes and like overall system. And I also would highly recommend, if it's, if you have the bandwidth, I worked at the Blue at the information desk as an undergrad. And surprisingly, like having work experience, even something like answering a phone really helped, I think, with employers and showing that I could multitask and that I was good at managing time. And I also worked for 2 years before applying to law school. And I think all of that really prepared me for kind of the large amount of responsibility and nonstop schedule of law school too.
Perfect. And what organizations or activities are you guys involved in currently in law school?
Yeah, I'm only currently a member of one club, the Sports Entertainment Law Society. I'm hoping that once stuff gets back on campus, I'll get involved in more. I'm sure I'm hoping Alex can speak more to that.
Yeah, I am lucky. At least my first semester of law school was in person, and I kind of joined everything that caught my attention. So I was part of the consumer rights workshop, which basically allows first semester law students to handle local people's small claims and like actually prep them for trial, help them like figure out which laws are relevant to their particular case. And I think that helped me a lot. I would say whatever you can do early on in law school that lets you get some practical, experiential practice in there is really important. And then I also am an editor for the Berkeley Technology Law Journal, which has been great in terms of meeting people with similar interests. I joined the Pro Bonouts, which was the law school a cappella group. I think it's nice to have something less serious and fun to do with your classmates. It's easy to get caught up in the constant, like, I'm so stressed. Oh yeah, I'm so stressed too, and comparing schedules and whatnot. So I would definitely recommend not gearing all of your extracurricular activities towards what you think will look good on a resume or towards what you think is going to get you a job. It's important to like remember that you're a human being also and keep those other interests going too.
Let me add on to what Alex just said. I think what she said is really important because you don't get to law school unless you're a serious student. So you're already oriented in that direction of it's work, it's concentration, it's task orientation and all those sorts of things. But like Alex said, you got a life. And Jake, you mentioned this earlier as well. Um, a lot of law schools will have, as y'all know, you have clubs. Some of them are very law related, obviously. Others aren't. I mean, I was down at the University of Texas in Austin, and they had an intramural flag football league in the law school. And the most excited I saw the students was when they posted that week's results on the bulletin board, and I almost got stampeded. So, you know, again, you've got to find ways to let your brain cool for a little bit, you know, have some stress relief, whatever it is. You got to have time for self-care. And some of the better law schools around the country really begin to structure that in so that it's easy for you to participate with your colleagues in doing something that's healthy for you, either mentally or physically.
Awesome, thank you. And then what inspired you to go to law school?
For me, it was my aunt and one of my cousins practice. One practices in Oregon, the other practices in Washington. So I talked to them about the kind of stuff they do on a daily basis. And for me, I've always hated math and I've always enjoyed writing. So it kind of seemed like a little natural in that sense. And then I remember taking classes like constitutional law. I already talked about criminal law. I think I took intro to public law and just a handful of other classes. And the more classes I took related to law, the more I enjoyed it. So I just kind of happened organically over my time in undergrad.
I initially went to TCU thinking that I was going to be like a reporter or something. And I took a bunch of different classes through the women's studies minor. And I, worked at a couple different jobs after undergrad. And for me, I just kept coming back to how interesting I found certain classes at TCU. I took Dr. Sam Arnold's Intro to Political Science class, my last semester of law school, or my last semester of undergrad, and I really regretted not exploring that more. I was like, why am I just discovering how interesting this is? But for me, I definitely just, at the end of the day, couldn't really see myself wanting to do anything else long term. I would also recommend, if you're considering going to law school, there's a book called 1L of a Ride, and it kind of includes like little excerpts that you might read from a case book. It talks about the way exams are structured, and I felt like it gave me enough of a window into what I would be experiencing in law school. I was like, okay, I definitely want to do this. I feel like I can do it, and I can't imagine doing anything else.
Perfect. Thank you. How did you prepare your personal statements for your applications?
Yeah, so this is easier said than done, but I would advise doing your best to tailor your personal statement to that law school. So maybe look at some of their strengths, and I mean, don't lie, obviously, but find something that you're interested in. So for me, I was talking about sports, so I wrote my personal statement about working in sports law, and that tailored well to Pepperdine's the programs they offer. And as far as resources, again, I will say go take advantage of what TCU offers. I remember I walked into Dr. Scott's office and it's just like, hey, like I'm kind of struggling. I don't know where to start with my personal statement. He's like, all right, take out a notebook. I'm going to give you the exact like template of how to structure your personal statement. So it's just stuff like that. And then most professors, if you ask, will review it for you. They'll give their own insight and opinion. I'm sure Dr. Carter has a ton of experience with other students' personal statements. So just again, take advantage of everything that TCU has to offer.
I think the best piece of writing advice I ever got was from Dr. Richard Enos, and he recommended writing as much as you can on a paper, printing it out, and literally carrying it around in your pocket with you, because you never know when inspiration might strike, and kind of living with an idea for a while really helps flesh it out. So for me, I started on my personal statement as early as I could think of just a basic idea, and then over time it changed completely. But I think it changed in a way that really reflected my actual experiences and my actual like narrative that I was creating as I was going through the law school application process. So I would say give yourself plenty of time to think of an idea, and then give yourself permission to completely delete it or completely change it and go in a completely different direction. And I would also say, if you end up wanting more feedback, surprisingly, Reddit has a really supportive like law school application community, and a bunch of people on there would exchange their personal statements, edit it for like grammar, just little tiny last minute things where you can't expect a professor to drop everything, and reread it before you send it off. So I don't know, I actually ended up meeting some people that went to Berkeley with me, and we're all still friends and have a study group. So definitely reach out to as many people as you think might be willing to help you, and they probably will.
Awesome, thank you. And then I know, Jake, you mentioned this a little bit, but do you guys have any other resources or advice that may help prospective law students?
I would just say, I'm trying to think of resources. I've heard of, I think there's I didn't use the service, but I think there's a program a lot of my friends use called Power Score. And there's a lot of like practice problems and lessons there. And I think you can even like send in personal statements and stuff and they'll review them for you. But really for the LSAT, I think a lot of it just comes down to repetition. And that's kind of similar to law school in the same sense, where it's you're gonna get what you put into it. So it's, however, that's the best advice I can give. It's a grind, but you got to embrace it.
Let me throw in an idea. When you talk about resources that are going to help you, obviously one of the biggest obstacles in people's thinking is, oh my God, this LSAT, I heard it's hard, I heard it's different. It doesn't, test what I know. It tests my brain somehow. And to some extent, that's certainly true. So it is foreign to most of us. And you do need to prepare carefully. And one of the things that I've come down to is sort of a mantra is, just as Alex said, looking at this book, One Hell of a Ride, to give you an idea of what's coming. One of the things I now recommend students to do is to take advantage of the Khan Academy's LSAT prep program, because it's prepared along with the assistance of the Law School Admissions Council, which is the organization that writes the LSAT, administers it, and handles the coordination of your law school applications. The other incredible advantage of the Khan Academy's program is that it's free. Hello, can't beat free. And so what I recommend students is to start there. And then, like Jake suggested, once you've got that, some sort of preliminary understandings, then look to someone else, whether it's Testmasters or PowerScore or 7Sage or Blueprint or the biggies, Kaplan or Princeton Review, or there's a TCU course taught through Extended Ed on LSAT prep. There are a lot of ways to get more resources, but one of the easy things you can do is start with something like the Khan Academy's program.
Awesome, thank you. Let's see. If you guys could change one thing about your time in law school, what would it be and why?
I'd start outlining early, like right away. That was definitely one of my bigger mistakes. Is I kind of waited a little too long to start outlining. There's a lot of class notes. I think my classes are about hour 40 each, give or take. But there's a lot. So like, to give you a comparison, I've always typed my notes. And undergrad, I think at the end of the semester, my class notes would probably be around like 75, 80 pages. Mine are like 150 pages now. So it's a lot of information, and outlining is the best way not only to study, but to organize your information. So I would just say get on that right away.
If I could change one thing, I would probably make it not be on Zoom. But more realistically, I would say, like, paradoxically, listening to less of other people's advice about some things and more of other people's advice about others. I feel like I got really caught up in listening to what other people had to say about, like, oh, you should only use this one program to take notes. Like, I only ever use Evernote or whatever. And I ended up not being able to figure out how to use it. I don't know. I guess I'm not as technologically advanced as I thought I was, but I think I wasted a lot of time worrying about what other people were doing and letting myself get caught up in the people that were saying, oh, I stayed up all night studying and I still think we're all going to fail, yada, yada. Don't listen to that, but do listen to the, like, when I was a freshman or 1L, there would be 2Ls and 3Ls watching me spin my wheels and freak out and telling me, there's only so much you can do on a single day in terms of learning new material. Sometimes it's best to just get that full 8 hours of sleep, wake up fresh, and come back at it. So looking back at 1L, knowing that that was the only semester so far I've had in person, I'm like, gosh, I really wish I had spent more time like connecting with my classmates over things that weren't like negative and stress related. Probably would have focused more on like the a cappella group and less on like my neurotic study group. So definitely do your best to trust yourself and trust that you know what you should be doing and that you know your own limits and your strengths and weaknesses in terms of studying.
Can I add something here? One of the things that happens in law school, and it certainly happens in other graduate programs, is this concept called imposter syndrome. It's the idea that I don't know how I got here. I look around in my class and everybody seems smarter than me, or everybody seems to know more than me. And you really begin to doubt yourself. And don't do that. If the law school thought enough of you to admit you to the class, then you belong, and you belong just like anybody else. And what you don't know is that fancy, strong veneer that you see from other people is just that. It's a veneer. They're worried too. They're insecure too. they're looking around at what everybody else is doing too. So embrace the fact that you're there, embrace the fact that you belong there. And if you do your best, you'll be fine. And doing your best does not mean doing superhuman stuff. It does, like both Jake and Alex have said, it does involve making time for yourself, getting that 8 hours of sleep when you need it, taking a mental break when you need to, stopping and watching a movie and getting away from the books, whatever it is you need to do to keep your sanity. Everybody should do that, because it's one thing to have time to work. It's a totally separate thing to have the mental focus to work. And if you're trying to force yourself to do your schoolwork, do your reading and all that stuff, when your head's not really there, you're just kind of wasting your time. So give yourself permission to be human. Give yourself permission to have more than 2 dimensions in your life. Get to know your classmates. Do the hobby. Read a novel. Whatever you can do to clear your mind, and trust the fact that you're supposed to be there. You're in the right place.
Absolutely. Thank you. I know this was mentioned previously just a little bit, but how does the amount of work in law school compared to the amount of work in your undergrad?
There's definitely an uptick. I'm not gonna downplay that. But the best advice that I've tried to apply to law school is actually from Dr. Carter that he gave me my freshman year. And you want to treat it like a job almost. So whether that's 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours, this kind of comes back to getting on a consistent schedule. Just make sure you budget enough time to get done what you need to get done. And at first, it can be hard and can be a little intimidating because, there's a lot of reading and of that. Okay, so I'll give an example. Say you have like 2 classes the next day and you have like a total of 60 pages to read. And in that 60 pages, it's like 5 to 6 cases. And a lot of those cases at first can be really dense and it's kind of hard to get what's going on. But the more cases you read, the easier it gets. And I'd say don't be afraid don't just rely on like third-party outlines, but don't be afraid to like do the reading, be like, all right, I have no idea what I just read. And then go try to find like a third-party source like Quimby's really good. I think most law schools will give you access to websites for free that'll have outlines such as Lexis and Westlaw. So just don't rely on them, but definitely take advantage of them.
I think for me, the most significant difference between undergrad and law school has been that law school isn't as intuitive, where in undergrad, you get assigned papers in different subjects, but they're all like, how to write a paper, regardless of what subject it's in. Where law school, you're learning a completely different way of absorbing information. Instead of someone just telling you, like, this is what you need to know, they give you 3 different cases and you're expected to like somehow subliminally put them all together and get what the rule is. My civil procedure professor, 1L, first semester, described the beginning of law school like drinking from a fire hose, because you're getting so much information at one time and it's so hard to slow down and get the bigger picture or even get like the finer details within that stream of information. So I would say don't despair if the first few weeks are really hard. I left the first few days of school and fell asleep immediately. Like I would start walking home from campus and think, all right, as soon as I get home, I'm going to crack open contracts. And then when I finish contracts, I'm going to start doing this. And then it was like passed out immediately, thought maybe like something was wrong with me. It was like, okay, my brain is working overtime. I need to give myself, the grace and the self-compassion to just try to get one little piece of information at a time. And I can say now as a 2L, even though when I finished my finals last semester, I didn't necessarily feel any smarter or like more capable of doing law school, somehow, like maybe by osmosis or something, this year has been a lot easier. You kind of subconsciously start to understand what you need to be paying attention to in the cases. So I would say it is really hard, and initially it's a lot more work and it's mentally and physically exhausting, but even if you don't notice, you're getting better at it over time, and before you know it, it's not going to feel like this all-consuming massive burden to do your reading every night.
Awesome, thank you. Do you guys have any tips for preparing for the LSAT while managing undergrad?
Yeah, so I took the LSAT during my first semester, my senior year. So it's definitely doable if you're thinking about taking it soon. But again, just kind of go budgeting time. That's definitely it's like even if it's only like 1 hour, 2 hours of just practice problems, it's better than nothing. So I would just find times where you're free or when your schedule permits and just do what you can. That'd be my advice.
I took the LSAT while working full time, so it wasn't while I was an undergrad, but it was while I had a lot of other stuff on my plate. And I would say, as much as it kind of is not very fun, waking up early, like at 6 a.m., there's probably no one sending you emails or friends texting you memes or whatever. Like you can check Facebook, but there's probably nothing on there. So just making time for yourself when you can really focus and make the most of that time. Like I mentioned earlier, I would spend a long time period studying, but not actually get very much like useful work done. So I would say checking in with yourself and being honest with yourself, whether you are being productive and if you're not, changing something.
Awesome. Thank you guys. So now we're going to open the floor to the other students to ask questions. If you guys want to unmute yourself to ask the questions, or if you want to type them in the chat, I can go ahead and read them out loud. So I have a couple, so I'm just going to go ahead and start with that. Perfect. When should we start prepping for the LSAT and looking for schools?
Everyone's different. I feel like when it comes to study time. So I probably studied for about 3.5 months, but I know people who studied for over a year. So it really kind of you have to do your own cost benefit analysis. Is it going to be worth your time and effort to study for over a year and then take the LSAT, or you have to, I would say, and your LSAT score is important, not just for what schools you get into, but it can make a big difference for scholarships. So I don't want to downplay that. But again, at the same time, what stress are you willing to put yourself under? And a lot of people will retake the LSAT and they'll do better, but a lot of people will retake the LSAT and get the same score. So it's very, very individualistic in that sense. So I just say do what's best for you.
Can confirm I took the LSAT 3 separate times and only got 1 point difference. So definitely consider whether or not you're like, if you've studied for the LSAT and you've taken it and you don't feel like you're capable of being a more productive studier, like I just could not make myself engage with logic games, then don't spend the money and the time retaking it. But I would also say I found it, I think this is another question that's in the chat, but I found it really helpful to have worked for a short period of time before law school. I just feel like it made me really consider whether I wanted to go back to school. I feel like once you're out of school, the thought of going back is a lot less attractive than when you're still there. So it can help you make sure that that's what you really want to do. And also kind of explore your other options. I realized that I didn't really have any other career options that got me as inspired or excited. So it gave me that extra push to keep studying and keep working on my personal statement when it was like I had this end goal that I knew for sure I really wanted.
Awesome. With that being said, do you think it's better to immediately go to law school after undergrad or to wait?
Again, this kind of just depends on the person. I've met a lot of people who are like me and went straight from undergrad to college, but then I think the median law school age is like 25, 26. There's people in my classes who are in their mid to late 30s with children, and then there's people who just got out of undergrad. So it's really what works for you. My roommate I think he's 25, 26, and he worked in a restaurant for 2 years, and that kind of motivated him to do better on the LSAT and go back to school because he wanted to have a better career. And it just kind of goes both ways. You got to find what works for you. But I will say, don't be against taking a gap year if you do want to take that time to work and see what's out there, or just to improve your LSAT score, I mean, it doesn't hurt. Everyone's in the same boat. So
I would say yes, there's nothing more motivating or that makes me feel more gratitude at law school than remembering like a year and a half ago, I was working in a restaurant getting yelled at over like whether something was Coke or Pepsi. So it did give me very valuable perspective there. When I'm sick of studying, it's like, would I rather do this or like be making someone's drink? And I would also say if you don't feel really confident about another portion of your application, like if your GPA didn't get to where you wanted or your LSAT didn't get to where you wanted, some sort of like gap year experience, whether it's a job or an internship, can supplement and strengthen your application and maybe make up for some of the weaker areas. So that might, whether or not a gap year is good in your particular case may depend on your ultimate goals in terms of where you go and how great you feel about the other portions of your application.
Awesome, thank you. And I know this was kind of mentioned earlier, but what kind of internships do you recommend getting while still in undergrad?
I would recommend trying to find something in a law firm, even if it's just like working at the front desk or something, because I think it does help your case if you do have some background working in the legal field. It's really just kind of, I won't say there's like a particular internship you need. Everyone's background is different, and just whatever you have, play that, like be yourself, play that in your personal statement and own your uniqueness.
I would definitely say you can spend whatever experience you get. Like I worked at the Cowgirl Museum. I didn't do anything particularly relevant for my undergraduate internship, but in my application and in interviews, I emphasized like, oh yeah, when I was at the Cowgirl Museum, I had to deal with a bunch of different data points and then synthesize them into biographies about the cowgirls that have been nominated. So definitely don't sell yourself short. Like I don't know, you might feel embarrassed like, oh yeah, I was working at a restaurant before law school, but every job, inherently has skills that it's building in you. So don't feel like you're not allowed to emphasize the things that you learned at a position, even if they don't seem directly related to law school.
Let me chime in on this too. Law schools are looking for someone who has good people skills and who is responsible and who is accountable for their own performance. And you can demonstrate that in an internship. And like Jake said, it doesn't have to be in a legal firm necessarily. I've got a guy at LSU who did all his internships in the medical field. And as a result, he picked up skills of working in a professional office, being accountable and responsible for projects and things like that. You can do that with an internship, and you can do that in a lot of different settings, and you can do that with paid employment like Alex is talking about. You can talk about, keep in mind, law is a service profession. You are serving the needs of someone else, a client, an employer, the public, the greater good, but you're serving someone else's needs. So every skill, and Alex, I'm picking up on your point here, every skill that you can imagine that you polished in either an internship or a paid work experience, that can become relevant, whether it's working with difficult individuals, whether it's communication skills, whether it's computer skills, whether it's writing, whether it's managing others, even if it's a very low level. All those things can matter and can make you look better in your application.
Awesome, thank you guys. The next question is, how can you secure as much scholarship as possible for law school?
I think honestly, a lot of that does come down to your LSAT score, based off my conversations with my friends. But also, I think if you have a unique background, you can play onto that, and they'll definitely factor that in. I'm not entirely sure the exact process that law schools go to decide how much money to give someone or whether or not to give them money. but I would guess that LSAT and GPA are probably the number 1 and 2 factors.
I have also, something I would not have known before applying to law school is that you can actually negotiate your scholarship. And if you have, it's expensive to apply to law school, but for me, it was worth it applying to some lower, like schools with lower LSAT and GPA medians where I knew I would get a full ride, and then turning around and telling Berkeley, like, hey, I really want to go to Berkeley, and I meant everything I said in my personal statement about how I think this is the school for me, but I have like these offers from school X, Y, and Z in the same area, and I'll have to take those instead of coming to Berkeley if I don't get anything. And I went from $0 in scholarship money to like a very significant scholarship. They like immediately gave me the full amount I asked for, and I had asked for way more than I thought I deserved, just because I figured better start high and then I can back down. But again, that kind of ties back to not telling yourself no, like Dr. Carter said. Don't give up if you don't immediately get the scholarship you want. You'd be surprised. There are even like third-party scholarships that don't come directly from the school. If you're interested in a particular kind of law, or if you are from a certain geographic region, there's all kinds of other ways that you can finance law school, and play to your strengths and find a way to go where you want to go, regardless of their initial offer.
One of the things that I tell students at TCU who come to talk to me is like both of you have said, you want to apply to a range of schools, and I tell students, I want you to have options. I want you to have an admission to a school that blows your socks off. You're so happy to be admitted there, and then I want you to have money offers from perhaps a lower ranked school, and you might choose to go to the lower ranked one because you don't want the student debt hanging over your head, and that's your choice, and that's fine. Or like Alex said, you can take the money offer at the somewhat less prestigious program and go back to the one that you really want to go to, and negotiation is normal now. It's not unusual. All you have to do is be very matter of fact about it. School X has promised me this financial aid package. I would prefer to go to your university's law school. Is there anything that you can do to make it easier for me to come? And then see what they say, and continue the conversation. You don't want to bargain your way out of a good deal, but I don't think that's really the case hardly anymore.
Awesome. And then I believe this was briefly mentioned, but is your LSAT score more important than your GPA?
Yes, definitely. And maybe that's kind of unfortunate, but that's also the way everyone's taking the same standard test. So that way there's not people with different majors. So I would say, I think the breakdown I heard was like LSAT's normally like 60%, and then GPA and other like resume and other stuff is like 40%.
I would also say if you don't feel confident, like the LSAT for me was really stressful. I found it really stressful to like go stand in a big line with a plastic baggie full of pencils surrounded by other people that are freaking out about like a life-changing moment. So if standardized tests aren't your thing, I think most schools will allow you to write like a supplemental essay explaining that and saying, hey, I don't think my single LSAT score is representative of my abilities. Look here at my GPA, look here at X, Y, and Z professor who've written me very heartfelt, sincere letters of recommendation. And again, there's like a bunch of calculators you can go to online, and you put in your GPA and you put in your LSAT, and I very far outperformed all of the calculations on those. So I would say don't get discouraged, and again, don't count yourself out if you didn't do as well in the LSAT if you wanted. Like I took it 3 times before I gave up, and I was like, I guess I just have to settle for a school that I'm not as excited about. And then I just really put sincere time and effort into my application, and things worked out anyway.
generally speaking, if you really want to have a career in what they call big law, you know, the big nationwide law firms that are going to have an office in every major metropolitan area and that sort of thing, then generally, I think Jake's advice is correct, that the LSAT score is more important because you really do need to get into one of the top schools, you know, a T14 kind of school. However, I have a lot of students at TCU who want to be lawyers and want to go to work for NGOs, want to work for you know, and those sorts of things. So it kind of depends on your career direction. For them, the GPA may be just as important or more important, and it kind of varies by school. I know here locally in the North Texas area, Baylor puts a lot more weight on LSAT, and SMU puts a lot more weight on GPA. And so they're not that far apart in the rankings or in the miles, but they have different philosophies on it. So like Jake said, own your uniqueness and sell it the best that you can.
Awesome, thank you. Besides location and financial aid, what other factors did you look at when you guys were evaluating schools?
So I kind of talked about this earlier, but I would definitely look into what schools are known for, since they're like, what are they advertising? So like, again, I talked about entertainment and sports. So Pepperdine heavily advertises that with, because LA is like 40 minutes away. So that was for me what I looked into. There's a lot of factors. I would say look at school size, maybe look at how your interactions are with the admissions office. That could be a big indicator of how you're going to be treated when you're at the school.
I definitely considered like financial aid and location, but I also looked at portability. You can see, I don't remember the exact website, but law schools publish like where their graduates are now working. So I looked at that because I thought that I wanted to come back to Texas, but I also thought maybe I would get to Berkeley and want to stay in San Francisco. So it was important to me that wherever I chose to go to school would eventually work with my plan as it was revealed to me. And then also, I just really liked Berkeley's message. They don't do normal grades because they don't want students to like fight with each other. They want to build a community. So instead of like getting an A or a B or a C, you get either a pass or honors. And I thought that was going to be really important to me. I know at TCU, I felt like I was so focused on getting like the perfect GPA in case I wanted to go to law school that I felt like I missed out on some of the fun, like normal college experience. Same with working during undergrad. I felt like I was always busy and I wanted to be sure that whatever law school I went to, I could kind of like relax a little bit, which relaxing in law school turned out to not really go together too often. But I think just thinking about your long-term goals, what it will take to get you there, and what, like, if you're not sure of what your long-term goals are, what gives you the most options.
Awesome, thank you. And then Jake, this question is for you. What do you think the most helpful and engaging source Pepperdine has done to help you through entertainment law?
Definitely networking, and with the mentor they paired me with. So my preceptor, I think, he works for Amazon Studios. He used to work for Warner Bros. But he has been like, he gave me his phone number the first day. So whenever I have a question about stuff, I reach out to him. And not just that, but they have provided a lot of a lot of alumni will reach out and give us their personal phone numbers, because as I think we kind of touched on earlier, networking is a big part of it. It's not just law school, but it's whatever field you want to go into, you can't substitute networking. Having good relationships with your classmates and your professors, because those are the people that you're most likely going to have professional relationships with at some one point or another. So that's probably the best is networking.
Perfect. And I know this next question was kind of briefly already answered, but before studying the LSAT, should we take a prep test to know our starting point and our weaknesses?
I think that helped me. I still remember like sophomore year at TCU being given some like giant book of LSAT questions at an event and taking it back to my dorm room and looking over it and then just kind of getting in my mind what sorts of skills I would need to develop to be successful when I eventually took the exam. Also, I think Jake's already mentioned this, but you can buy like books of practice tests off Amazon, like the actual previously administered LSAT, and then you can measure, you know, where you need to be to get into the school you'd like to attend, where you're at. And then for me, like I've mentioned, logic games just never clicked. And I was able to purchase like the Power Score Logic Games Bible and then just drill through those. And I think that way, you can not waste any of your time focusing on stuff that you already have sort of an intuitive grasp on and really focus on where you need to improve because every point can make a difference in terms of where you're at with the medians of different schools.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think that some of the stuff in the LSAT will look pretty random, and at first, especially like the logic games, the first logic game I saw, I was like, how the heck do you do this? I've never seen anything like this. So I think it can help to know like where you're strong at naturally and where you maybe need to reinforce a little more. But yeah, as Alex touched on, like their sites will give you strategies because most of it's a time crunch. So it really is strategizing how to attack these problems. But yeah, taking a test first could definitely show you your strengths and weaknesses. So I would recommend that.
One more just additional thing I thought of on that. Another TCU grad who ended up scoring in like the 99th percentile on the LSAT or something absurd. She recommended taking as many practice tests as possible. She was in a sorority. She did a bunch of other social things, but she would wake up at like 5 a.m, take a full LSAT before going about her business. And she said it got to the point where she was so familiar with the LSAT and like the different constructions of the questions that she would recognize the same answers with different stuff, where one question would be like, if there's 8 sharks and 9 fish swimming in the ocean. And she said it got to the point that on the actual LSAT, when she saw if there are 12 wolves and 9 sheep running around in the field, and she just already had everything categorized up there, and it was second nature going through the test. And she only had to take it, I think the first time she took it, she didn't do as well. And then the second time she took it, she only missed like 3 questions or something. So there is, if you have the dedication to it, it's definitely a learnable test. And the test makers do recycle the same sort of framework for their questions. So I do think you can't overstate the importance of repetition and of doing as many practice tests as you can.
Awesome. Well, does anyone else have any questions for our panel?
Yeah, I have a question about the personal statement. Would you suggest to focus more on our future aspirations of what, I don't know, we're interested in law, or especially like you guys were talking about tailoring it to each law school, or should we focus on our strengths as an individual and maybe like our past experiences and I don't know, like per se, like if you have a unique major or something or work experience, like how would you choose what to focus on for that?
I mean, that's the thing about the personal statement is you kind of have the option to go about it however you want. So what I would recommend is if you do have something if you do have a unique major, or if maybe your ultimate like career path is different or unique, I would go for that. I would write it to make yourself stand out. That would be my best, because they're getting so many applications, and I'm sure there's so many that sound and look the same. But yeah, you can't go wrong. Whatever works best for you. Whatever you think is going to be the best paper you can write.
I think the most successful personal statements, and actually most law schools will put like sample statements or, you know, different websites will post sample statements and also include like what schools the person got into using those. I think the common thread is that they do a good job of balancing past experience, what makes the student unique, what strengths they would bring to the law school, and they kind of sell themselves to the law school and like explain, you know, if I were to be accepted here and have the benefit of obtaining a legal education here, here's how that would benefit the world as a whole. And also something to keep in mind is that a lot of law schools ask for supplementary essays as well, and they're optional, but if there's something that you think is unique about your experience or like unique about you, then you're able to supplement your application with another paper, just so that you're not trying to cram too many things into one.
The one thing I would urge you not to do is simply repeat what's on your resume. Now, you can take an item on your resume and talk about how that shaped your desire to become a lawyer, but don't just recycle, you know, I've done this, I've done that, I've done this. I think I'd be great in law school because of this, that, and the other. I had a personal statement that I reviewed for a TCU student that I had to tell her that, you know, I wouldn't admit her based on her personal statement because she was basically selling herself and her accomplishments so hard that it almost came across as if the law school would be lucky to have her. And I said, I don't think that's the signal you really, really want to send.
Thank you, guys. Does anyone else have any questions? No? Okay, perfect. Thank you guys so much for coming and answering all of our questions today.
Thank you.
Thanks to Jake and Alex, particularly.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Carter, too, for being here. That was great.
Well, I help any TCU student, regardless of major, if they want to come contact me. And a lot of good advice was provided to you by these two individuals today.
Bye, everybody. I put my email in the chat. If anyone has any additional questions, I'm happy to like look over a personal statement or anything else. Love to see more Horned Frogs going to law school. Got to get more TCU lawyers out there. So great talking to you guys.
I also put my email in the text chat, so if anyone's considering Pepperdine, or I think I applied to pretty much all the law schools in Texas, I'm more than happy to share any insight or help you with anything you need.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.
Hi, everybody.
That was awesome. I really appreciate you being here. That was very helpful for our students.
Glad to do it.
Thank you, guys.
Happy to help. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.